So welcome to another episode of Tolkien with Friends. Today we're excited to have our friend and, resident Tolkien expert, KnewBettaDoBetta, join us to talk about chapters Treebeard, the White Rider, and the passage of the Marshes. So KnewBetta, I know you always are keeping very busy, so can you just let everyone know where to find you and what you've been up to?
Hey, how you doing, guys? What's going on? KnewBettaDoBetta here. Really excited to be on the show. My good friend Andy and new friend, hopefully, Anna. Literally, you can find me on TikTok always at KnewBettaDoBetta. You guys know how to spell it. If you don't, it's KNEW DOBETTA DOBETTA. Awesome. Guys, you can also find me at YouTube, the same thing, KnewBettaDoBetta. Also, literally, all my things are KnewBettaDoBetta. There might be like a 3 after it because somebody already done got the name or something like that. But you look up KnewBettaDoBetta, you'll find me. You'll see my logo on there. So,
yeah, and honestly, if I'll be shocked if any of our listeners aren't already following you. But listeners, if you're not, that is a huge mistake that you need to correct immediately. Anna nodding in so much funny. Agreement. So we're big fans over here, that's for sure.
Thank you. As of late, I've been extremely busy. As you guys know, I just got back from London a couple weeks ago. Literally, we're able to see 20 minutes of footage and meet the showrunners and to go on an excursion to Tolkien's, his workplace, where he went to school, where he wrote the books, where he got his first work published. It was really a humbling and surreal experience. Very excited. I've been doing other podcasts and doing my own podcast, as you know. Also been, just hosting other things and also dealing with real life as well. It's very important.
Of course.
I took a little break from TikTok the last week or so, probably last couple weeks, just to reset, get my energy back where it needs to be. And I'll be back on there like tomorrow or something like that. But yeah, just I got more stuff coming up. I'm going to be in a GCX event in Florida where we're going to be doing the Lord of the Rings panel.
That's amazing.
Creators, Glam, Shatterskull, and a couple others, which will remain, a secret until we do it. Please forgive the noise. I'm in the wilderness right now. My son had a birthday party I had to bring him to, so I had to do this on the fly. But Andy was very gracious allowing me to do that, so I didn't want to miss it. And I'll just be keeping myself busy. And we just did trivia. We just did Lord of the Rings trivia, which was awesome. We're going to be doing another one very soon. So that's just what I've been doing lately, guys.
Yeah, it's always something fun going on, from the trivia showdowns to Voices of Arda. We had Callie come in and introduce the podcast when I think right after your first episode, so people should know about that. They should be listening in on that too, and it's been really great episodes.
You guys are following Callie Cosplay. Make sure you follow her. She's awesome. She is literally like the angel on my shoulder. She is the backbone of everything. She just came in. She was like, I'm down to do everything. And she literally does the logistics of everything. She should be like a commander somewhere in the armed forces because she's just so on point with everything. So shout out to Callie. If you're not following her, please follow her. She's awesome.
We love her. And we'll make sure that links to everybody's stuff is in the description of the podcast so that you can easily find everybody. And definitely join, the Discord that Callie is the queen of. And, we have a section for the both of our podcasts have sections in there for, you can kind of get the first notice about when new episodes come out and all of that. And we just have a really great conversations and community going on in there. It's been really fun. So if you want to just like hang out, that's definitely where you can find us, is in the Discord. So we'll remind you of that link as well, but I know we've mentioned it before, so get on in there is the message for that. So before we jump into the main contents of today's episode, I want to start with this quote from the passage of the Marshes, talking about Frodo's struggle with the burden of the ring. And then I want to talk to you guys about our favorite bad guy, Sauron. So
my guy.
our main man. So here is the quote, and this is from Frodo's perspective, talking about his him having more and more struggle with carrying the weight of the ring. So it says the I, capitalized, that horrible growing sense of a hostile will that strove with great power to pierce all shadows of cloud and earth and flesh, and to see you, to pin you under its deadly gaze, naked, immovable. So now, evidenced by this quote, this is just kind of setting the scene, but Sauron is mostly a disembodied evil in Lord of the Rings. You know, in the movie, you just see him as a big fiery eye. I mean, in the prologue of Fellowship, you see a figure, an actual person, you know, in the battle. But for the most part, he's this disembodied, he's way off, far away, not necessarily something that you face in person. And he's, you know, often referred to even more vaguely in the books. And, you know, it's surely a chilling description, but it's interesting to think about how most people's experience with Sauron is this disembodied evil force, not really like a fleshed out character, a person that you could even maybe relate to or understand the motivations of, per se. However, that is exactly what will have to happen in the new Rings of Power show coming out in September. And, you know, if not right away, he's going to be introduced at some point, and he should play a major part in the events and, you know, his interactions with people. So with KnewBetta's knowledge of the full legendarium and Anna's love for the spookier side of things, I thought that, and, you know, all of us enjoying a good bad guy, if you will, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you would hope to see from Sauron as a character on Rings of Power. Like, who should he be? Like, what would you expect Sauron to act like, to be like? How would you expect him to interact with people? And what ultimately makes a bad guy you love to hate?
Okay, so when you read The Lord of the Rings, the 3 books,
Mhm.
you get a sense of, just like you said, foreboding presence more so, you know, a lot of fear. And this is kind of what makes Sauron so potent in the, because you don't deal with him at all, but
Mhm.
there's just a fear of him, and so much fear that you're like, it's like, you know, that, oh, this guy must be a goon. He must be extremely powerful. His will, his will, they were scared of to say his name. So that in itself is enough to sustain him through the books, because you don't deal with him. The main antagonist throughout the Lord of the Rings is actually the Witch King. You deal with him. He's the physical presence that you have to deal with.
True.
So knowing the entire legendarium, rightfully so, Sauron is an absolute monster. So not only is he the strongest in Middle Earth, you learn this when you read the Silmarillion, you know, the Calibeth, which is in the back of the Silmarillion, of the Third Age and the Rings of Power, in the back of the Silmarillion, the last chapter in that book. You learn so much more about Sauron's powers, capabilities, and his deceptiveness. Now they talk about that shortly in certain chapters of Shadow of the Past. They
Mhm.
also talk about it in the Council of Elrond, and you get a little sense like he deceived them. But it's a mixture of strength and then deception. Sauron, unlike Morgoth, who was a very straightforward, I'm big bad villain, just straightforward, using all my force and all my creatures and everything to get what I want. When Sauron can't win, he will trick you and win. And that in itself is one of the most scariest parts about Sauron, that makes him extremely frightening. So he when he was under Morgoth's, you know, control or his sway, and he was second in command, he very much was using his force and his abilities. And then when he lost, he kind of had, okay, let me gather up and do something else. Let me do this. And he approaches things very differently, and he's methodical, and he thinks things out, and he does his patience is just as scary as his power,
Mm.
because you know how strong he is. He's the strongest Maiar on the planet by far in the Third Age. Even his spirit, he's not even at full power, and the 5 wizards are scared of him. You know what
Right.
I mean? Gandalf in itself is scared to go against the Witch King. And this isn't from the book. I mean, the movie. This is from the book. If you
Right.
read it, he's not sure he can handle the Witch King, who is second in command to Sauron. So Sauron is completely on another level. So I think it's a very much John Wick-esque type thing where they're scared of John Wick immediately, even though he's the good guy. You know, it's just like, wow, this guy must be a badass. So you don't get to see him do much, but you know from the onset he has got to be a problem. And then when you learn all the things he's done, which we'll go over, I'm sure, you understand why he's such a problem, strength-wise and deception-wise, and all the different things he's able to do. So it's very important to read past the Return of the King, the Two Towers Fellowship, and to get that backstory. Then you'll be like, wow, they kind of really got away by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah, because it's interesting to think about, like, okay, so like in the Silmarillion, we know Sauron is I can't remember who it actually he says it to, but he promises to reunite
Elionel
someone.
and Gollum the Unhappy and his wife Elionel. So he completely
So
Gollum is,
he
one of the 12
tricks,
companions of Badr who are in the Dorthonian, they're outlaws. And all of their people have been killed or captured, and Gollum doesn't know what happened to his wife. They think she either was captured or killed or she ran away. He has no idea. So he goes and he keeps going back to the house to look for her, their old house. Sauron gets wind of this and he's like, oh, he knows she's dead, but Gollum doesn't know this. So he creates a wraith of her, and Gollum sees the wraith and is ensnared immediately, and goes into the house like a dummy and gets captured by Sauron. And
Stone Cold.
Sauron doesn't even just capture him and just say, oh, I got you now, and just, kills him. He's trying to get information. So he has his goons ask him, where are the 12 companions? If you tell us where, I'll reunite you with Elionel, his biggest hope. Sauron knows how to use this to his advantage. Finally, he breaks down and he tells where the 12 companions, where, Barahir and his companions are. He tells them. Sauron literally, then this is why they call him Gorthau the Cruel. He laughs in his face and says, Elionel is dead. She's been dead. But I'm a man of my word. I'm gonna reunite you with her. And he kills him and reunites them in death. So that's the type of person Sauron is. He's cruel, methodical, and very well thought out, because prior to that, Morgoth's forces have had no luck for, I think, 4 years. They were looking for Barahir.
Yeah.
And they had no luck. But when he sent Sauron, it got done immediately.
So messed up. It's so bad.
He's ruthless.
And it's interesting to think about. So maybe at least for our listeners and maybe also Anna's sake, let's talk about so the events of what should happen in Rings of Power, right? Is that Sauron as Anatar tries to get in with the elves, right? And they don't really know why. I don't think they really understand why they think he's sus, but Galadriel and Gil-galad they're like, no thanks. Whatever's happening here, no thank you. And so then he goes to Celebrimbor, who is, the greatest smith of his age. And it's like, you know what? I mean, I don't know how they're going to see. I think that this is the point where it's going to get really interesting for how they personify this character who's able to get in with Celebrimbor, who isn't a bad guy. It's not like he's going to come in all oozing of evil and like sliminess. He's not going to be like a Grima character where it's just like, ew, he's going to have to be like really smooth and smart and clever and someone that you would want to be friends with, you know what I mean? And so he gets in that way. They make all these rings. They're both kind of learning from each other, and that's how he's able to later go and make the One Ring, right? Which chaos.
An important thing to remember about that whole situation that's going to be happening in the Rings of Power, Sauron knows things that everybody else doesn't know. So if you're looking at the Rings of Power from a fresh perspective, you'll think, oh, he just tricked them and it was, he just got them and there was nothing behind it. There's a reason Celebrimbor specifically fell. So Celebrimbor is the grandson of Feanor. Feanor and his son Curfin were students of Aule. Sauron was the greatest student of Aule. The dwarves of Khazad-dûm were made by Aule and worship Aule. the Noldor worship Aule as well. They were students of Aule. So Celebrimbor, being the greatest smith of that age and the grandson of the greatest smith of all time, has a predisposition to literally wanting to make things, wanting to create. It's already in him. His father inherited that same skill from his father, who is Feanor. So it's on that line. They're predisposed to doing it. Sauron knows this.
Mhm.
Gil-galad and Galadriel and Círdan and Elrond
Mhm.
dealt with Sauron in a different way, where they had to deal with failing over and over again, dealing with Gorthour, dealing with where Celebrimbor was more removed. He was more removed from those things at that time. Where Gil-galad is dealing with deceit from the curse. Literally he didn't make it in time to the Havens. He's dealing with the backlash of the curse of the Noldor, also the curse of the oath. So he knows deceit when he sees it. So he doesn't trust anything, being that he couldn't even save Elrond and Elros. He knows, and he learned from Círdan all the deceptions of the past. He's now the king. He knows these things.
So would you say
Elrond,
that even though they didn't necessarily know it was Sauron, that just because of their history with
with the war, with the whole thing with Morgoth and all the betrayals, they were more like, I'm not trusting anything.
Right.
Whereas Celebrimbor was more removed. He was in Nargothrond and left Nargothrond and didn't really deal with the wars after that. So he was just on some, I want to start a new kingdom and build shit type stuff. Whereas Gil-galad and the rest, Galadriel and them, were dealing with the direct effects from all these curses and betrayals, and they have to deal with that and the backlash from it and the effects of it. So they were far less trusting than Celebrimbor. So Sauron used that to his advantage. So he wanted to get the strongest, but once he saw, hey, they're not messing with me, okay, let me move. I still want to mess with the Noldor. Oh, Celebrimbor, let me trick him. He's gonna want to make things. I have this unbelievable knowledge. I'm a student of literally who he worships and who he's a student of as well. You know what I mean? He is one of the greatest of that.
And didn't Saruman also like study under Aule?
Yeah.
I'm just like, dang, like Saruman's just like, who's in Aule's crew? And I'm gonna try to mess with these guys. And then you see that again with Sauron, obviously later in the Second Age, when he kind of gives up the elves as a bad job, goes back to Mordor and then decides to start messing with men and like the Numenorians. And I just think it's so funny how, like, is it Our Pharazôn? Is it that one? The king that
Pharazôn, yeah.
Oh yeah, that captures he comes to fight Sauron, and Sauron's like, oh no, you got me. You win. And then he like takes him back as a prisoner, but then somehow I think that'll be really interesting for them to play out, like how he goes from prisoner to counselor for this king. So I'm just like thinking about, like, when you're casting someone to be Sauron in this age, he's just so slippery, He's
slippery. When he can't, he would rather rule by force. It says this in the book. He would rather rule by force and fear. But when that doesn't work, he'll sweeten his tongue and he knows so much that he knows so much that so Beleriand was completely destroyed.
Right.
So as of that, there's 3 people that know everything: Sauron, Galadriel, and Círdan. Even Gil-galad is young. Gil-galad is much younger than Círdan and Galadriel. A lot of people may not realize that Gil-galad was a kid when he became the king. You understand? He's very young in the elf years. So Sauron is older than all of them. Sauron was made when the rest of the Ainur were made. So he knows way more than everyone. And the Valar don't interject themselves. They're tired of the world being destroyed. They leave men and their elves up to their own devices. They're like, you know what, enough is enough.
Yeah.
They only interject by sending the Istari over, the wizards, to try to help. But other than that, they're not doing it anymore. Every time they interject themselves, the world get destroyed. So Sauron has a big, huge advantage. So when he says, hey, this is how you should make this, and he knows this, This is why he disguised himself as one of the Vanguard elves, is because he has all this knowledge. Where'd you get this knowledge? Well, I'm from Valinor. I'm from, where the two trees, and okay, you definitely have this knowledge. Let me follow what you're saying.
Yeah.
Even Ar-Pharazôn, he knows it's Sauron, but he knows, well, Sauron is this being that has all this knowledge, regardless of whether he's bad or good. He knows all this shit. And since I captured him, let me listen to him. And everything he says, he's not dumb. He doesn't say stuff so it backfires on you immediately.
Right.
He says stuff that actually gets you what you want initially. So you're gonna follow him. You're like, oh, this gives me great wealth. This work. This gives me great power. He's giving me good information. And then it's too late when it backfires on you for you to get out of it.
Right. And ultimately it backfires on Sauron too, in a lot of ways, with like not for too long. Obviously he's playing the long game, so it doesn't matter. But like he loses like his physical form a bunch of times, and it's not like it's just interesting because it's like obviously by creating the ring and giving himself a way to control all these people, it's also the reason that they're ultimately in the Third Age able to defeat him for real this time, because he put so much of himself into that ring. So definitely feels like a commentary on like how like evil and stuff works. But
many people it's weird with Sauron sometimes too, because he literally wanted to he's wants to control the world and give it order. Which is an admirable thing. Literally his name means the admirable. That's what Myron, his original name, means the admirable. And it's just, you can't, when you have a free society, nothing's going to be in order because everybody's going to be doing whatever they want to do. It's how Melkor captures him, how he brings him to his side. If we control everything, then everything could be how you want it, and it'll be perfect order.
Yeah, and you see that echoed with Saruman in Lord of the Rings when he's trying to be like, Gandalf, like if we controlled everything, then we can make everything better.
Exactly. Yep. So you see the philosophy. It starts off from a good place, but once you get that power and that Melkor instill that evil, do it by any means type of thing, and then once Sauron's seen how that worked, and he just fully subscribed to it, and he can't even go back. He can't even go back from it. He literally just is. He's like, by any means necessary, I'm going to control this, and he's willing to do whatever. And he became cruel and revengeful, spiteful, hateful, and he is a terror.
That's fascinating, Anna. So, given all that information, if you were to put together, like, I don't know, a character write-up, knowing all the things that you know about the bad guys that you love, how would you make Sauron? Like, what would your notes be to whoever they cast?
Yeah, I like my villain to just be pure chaos. Like, it's just, that's the best word that I can use. If you think of like Ramsay Bolton in Game of Thrones, or Russell Edgington in True Blood. I just like people who are like off their rails, chaos, and they're doing anything to get what they want. So this actor is going to need to be very cunning. Definitely be able to use their words in a way that just makes you follow them. Probably very attractive. That will help them get to that like slimy, manipulative, cult leader type of a vibe. That's what they need to hone in on this villain.
Yeah, and they're not really telling us anything. Like they've started to tell us that, like we know who Galadriel is, and we know like some of these new characters who they are, but I feel like they're gonna try to keep us guessing about Sauron for a really long time. At least that's the vibe I'm getting. Right?
When it does happen. So,
because I have the vibe that they're even gonna try to fool like KnewBetta, like who knows everything that's supposed to happen. But obviously I don't know anything. I just think that based on what, like what you saw and meeting the showrunners and everything, like I just think that they seem to really know their stuff is what I'm hearing. And so my guess is that they will try to do their best to make it compelling television for anybody that's watching, including like the diehards. But
yeah, they literally know what they're talking about. They are fully in depth in the book, like not some general knowledge type stuff. They know what they're talking about, and everything that they are doing, there's a reason for. And this is why I'm like, okay, I trust what they're doing. Questions I had, they were able to answer far deeper than I ever even hoped for. I'm looking at them like, oh, they're movie guys or they're show guys, like corporate guys. They're going to know the basics of it, but they're not going to be like fully. And I could not have been more wrong. And that really impressed me. And I was like, okay, so certain questions I asked, I got excellent answers to. Why anything that I thought was going to be off or I didn't agree with, excellent answers as to why. And I was just stunned. And I'm like, okay, this show is in good hands. This, I understand why they're doing this. I agree. I completely see how you thought of everything. And I was just impressed all around. Now, that is going to make for good television to some people. To some people, they're going to be like, "Oh, this isn't right," and this is. You can't get everything right. They don't even have it's not possible. But being that they're following this story in this book, this part of the books, some things are going to have to be different, and just because of the vagueness of the entire Second Age.
Yeah, I mean,
there's going to be characters you don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's great. I think that that's really encouraging that they seem to know so much about, the story that they're dealing with. And honestly, I think a lot of the fans are mostly unfamiliar with this part of the story. So I think that that's really great that they're so familiar with it, and that, I'm excited to see what they do with it, because there's a lot of ways that this could go. And I think that it's, no matter what they do, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun for us to talk about. It's, disagree with, agree with, I think that anytime you get an adaptation, including Peter Jackson's, which is why we have this whole podcast, right, is that like they'll do things differently, but it sparks more conversation. It makes you think about the characters differently, and maybe gives you a new insight that you hadn't considered before. So I'm excited. I think that whether or not I agree with everything that they do, I think it's going to be a fun time for everybody.
Yeah. And I'm here saying I may not agree with everything that they do. I'm not sure. I didn't get to see the whole thing or anything like that, but we'll see. Hopefully I agree with most of the choices or whatever the case may have you. From what I've seen so far and heard so far, I'm on board, and the rest remains to be seen in September. But I'm very excited. What I saw was very good. It made a lot of sense. It all made sense to me. So hopefully you guys trust my word on things. If you don't, then that's on you. It is what it is. I understand. Who am I? I'm just a regular person like you guys.
Yeah, but you're like more than a regular person. Your brain works so differently than everybody. So, and I think it's amazing. So I trust you. I'm excited. I think it was great feedback. I'm so glad that you got to go. Like, what an amazing experience.
It was the best experience, man, I've ever had, man. It was awesome.
So it's like the first time where it's like, these sneak peeks happen with other shows, and I'm like, I don't know who that was that went. I don't know. But I'm like, several, you and Emily and people that I know, went on this trip, and, we're saying a lot of the same things, a lot of excitement. So I feel excited too. So
Andy probably doesn't notice because I don't tell her all the time, but she is literally like my favorite person on TikTok. Like, no, I'm being serious. Like, I'm like, that's my buddy. She smacked, like, like I tell people that all the time. Like, Annie's my homie. Like, you don't understand. Like, she's so fierce. Like, if she sees anybody say anything out of pocket, like, she'll jump in there. Like, I think that is so admirable. You one of the first people that I connected with I adore you. I really do. I think you're awesome. Your communication skills are awesome. You don't take a back seat to anybody. I really, being a fellow New Yorker, I really respect that. You know what I'm saying? It's a certain way we don't allow. It's like we don't allow people to just be talking crazy. Like that's not a thing. Like I'm very courteous, but at the same time, like don't be talking crazy to me, man.
Yeah,
You know what
I
I'm
think
saying?
you
Be
give
respectful.
people more benefit of the doubt than I do a lot of the time.
Yeah, and that I do, and I admire that you don't. I'm trying to be political sometimes just because of I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes you got to be a little bit of a voice when you have such a following. It's like you can't be outlandish sometimes. Even though I'll be wanting to be, I want to tell people how it really is, but
Mhm.
I still speak up for myself. But you just fully give them 100%. Like, listen, that's not
There's
right.
It's like
So,
I just think that after this many months, especially about like the explosion that happened in February, they've all
yeah,
given themselves away. Like if you the certain word choices that you make, like the things that you're like how you say it, and I'll give you like 2 comments or whatever before I'm like, is it over?
yeah.
You're wrong.
Try to give you the benefit of the doubt, but he said woke twice. You out of here.
Seriously, I'm like, okay, like I'm glad that whatever outlet spoon fed you some buzzwords and you don't know what you're talking about, but you can't come in here and tell me that I haven't read the books. Like I'm just like, no, you're done. I'm done. Like we're, I'm gonna tell you how it
So,
is. So
so how you liking the Two Towers so far, Anna?
I definitely think there's way more information in the Two Towers than I ever expected. It's I'm gonna be frank. It's my least favorite of the movies, so it's my one that I've watched the least. So I am learning a lot. We've only done one episode, but Andy talks about Lord of the Rings all the time, so I'm learning a lot more about the whole entire series.
well, I think that, and what's funny is that I feel like Two Towers, from what we've seen, like in my memory, and also just like doing this nitty gritty like analyzation of it every week, it's so far it feels the less Tolkien-y. It like the least like what Tolkien wrote, as far as how the characters act with each other and the way that changes were made. Like it's gonna get real weird once we get to Helm's Deep and all these like extra battle things that happen that actually don't happen in the book. We're not there yet, so I'm gonna hold off. But it's gonna be at a point where some things we're just gonna be like there won't be like a chapter equivalent to it anymore. You know what I mean? Like we're doing right now. So maybe that's a perfect segue into getting into the chapters. So just like we were talking about, matching the book chapters up to events in the movie it's getting messy as of now. So if you're following along this week, we're talking about extended edition of Two Towers from about 36 minutes and 20 seconds in to 58 minutes and 10 seconds in, so 20-ish minutes. And this is essentially everything in the movies, from Aragorn kicking the helmet near the pile of dead Uruk-hai until Frodo, Sam, and Gollum see the ring wraith, like the flying ring wraith, and Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli riding off to Edoras. So this, like I mentioned earlier, this roughly corresponds to the chapters Treebeard, the White Rider, and Passage of the Marshes. But when it comes to the Treebeard chapter, we really only touch on the beginning of the chapter, because here is where we start to see Peter taking the information in this chapter. Like we read about everything from Merry and Pippin entering Fangorn Forest until the Ents start marching to Isengard. But obviously he takes most of that and sprinkles it throughout, so that we're able to flip back and forth between all of the storylines at the same time. But Tolkien structures it pretty differently, and we're not going to see in the book, we're not going to see Merry and Pippin again for a little bit. And so there's like a different way that suspense is used in the book, and I think a different way to explain time. Like it's more about like how to kind of give you a sense of like what, like I don't know what's going on with Sam and Frodo for a long while, and then you see it towards the end of the book. But currently, in order to keep up with the movies, we're like flipping back and forth through different parts of the book. So if we want to talk about Treebeard's section of chapter, that's, we've got Merry and Pippin entering Fangorn, and they, what am I saying? They it's chased by an orc in the movie, and Merry and Pippin decide to climb a tree in order to escape. The orc grabs Merry because he's on a lower branch, and then then they realize that tree is alive, and it's Treebeard. In the book, they're not being pursued. It is all chill, really. They've escaped. They've had their snack, like we talked about last time, and they're entering Fangorn, and they're trying to figure out what to do, like where are they going to go next. So they find this. It's kind of like a hill. There's like these steps.
Treebeard remarks on it.
And they go and they look out, and they're seeing Fangorn, and the sun is shining. And when they go up that hill, they climb up and they pass an old stump of a tree with only 2 bent branches left. And it notes that it looked almost like the figure of some gnarled old man standing there blinking in the morning light. Spoiler alert, this is actually the first glimpse of Treebeard, but they don't realize that until Treebeard talks to them. And while I do personally love the design of Treebeard and the Ents in the movies, I think they look very cool. And also, if you're trying to like hide them in with the rest of the trees, they do a really good job of making it look very tree-like. But I was always curious about this, description and how they might have brought that old stump to life, of something that looked kind of like an old man, but not enough so that they would like pay attention to it. They assumed it was a tree. And they do talk about like the skin texture, like sometimes it's smooth, sometimes it's like bark, and Tolkien does mention toes and that kind of thing. So it's different. And I haven't like looked into other artists doing this, but it would have been interesting to see that come to life, I think, in the movies.
Yeah, I've seen several renditions of Treebeard artist wise, and some are outlandish and they look really, that you can see they're trying to follow what Tolkien wrote,
right?
But it looks very caricaturish when they actually put it to paper.
Yeah.
So I feel like the Peter Jackson choice here was a good choice. That's my personal opinion. I think that having them look like more like just straight up trees, and I think that was the better choice, because we don't want to distinguish them too much from trees.
Yeah.
Too much, because then it'll become a whole nother thing. Even though they kind of are, but they aren't.
Right. Exactly.
So I thought that was a good choice as far as their look. Of course, they had the drama, Merry and Pippin getting chased. That's for drama.
That's so Peter, though. Like, anytime he can, he will.
Anytime he can. This is weird because the really dramatic parts in the book he took out.
Yeah.
Which I don't understand. Like, the fight with the wolves he took out. I don't understand why he did that. The fight with Gandalf and the Nine on. Why would you take that out? That's super dramatic.
At first it was like he was taking things out, like a lot in Fellowship, but now, like, especially when we get, like the warg scene is coming to mind. We're not there yet, but as far as like adding things in, and so it's interesting because I know in like the appendices, for example, they talk about Shelob's lair, like that gets moved to Return of the King because he felt like that was too many climaxes. That would have been too many things all at once. But I'm like, okay, but the way that you structured the other ones, they were all kind of happening at the same time. So instead of making Frodo and Sam's problem be Faramir, why couldn't it have been Shelob? Because, And truly, like, the events of it, if you think about it in the timeline aspect, it maybe does happen a bit later, you know, but if we're matching the structure of the book, if that had gotten moved, then maybe there would have been room for like the scouring of the Shire, you know. There's a lot of moments like that where I'm like, but did you?
The Scouring of the Shire. I just don't see how it translates well into movie.
Yeah, I don't
But
know. I think it depends, right? Like, there's a lot of things that were kind of changed, and I do think that the way they cut Return of the King gave it a lot of like ending and then ending. But if there had been more of, like, for example, we've talked about this several times as far as the way that the hobbits are personified, and they are a lot of their agency is taken away from them in the movies. They're not given a lot of the brave lines or the bold lines. Like last time we talked about Pippin doesn't do his impression of Gollum to try to confuse that orc, right? And that is ultimately what gets them out of the circle of death with the Rohirrim and the Uruk-hai. But so they're not able to really show their stuff really until Return of the King. But I think it could have been, you know, a nice moment for them to kind of bring that full circle as far as the hobbits being able to take care of themselves, you know. But obviously, like, I'm not that hung up on the Scouring of the Shire, but I do think that there are character things that we lose when Peter does this thing where he like speeds up some of the dialogue parts to get to these longer action sequences.
I thought, for one, and it's my opinion, the biggest miss, one of the biggest misses in the Two Towers is Gollum. In Ed Marshes, Gollum's fear plays a big part in your fear. He's seen things and been places none of the other characters have gone to. Sam and Frodo have only been in the Shire. This is their first adventure. He's been to Mordor. He's been to Barad-dûr. He literally has been alive for 500 years. He's had the ring. He's dealt with all these things. He's been captured by this one, that one, and he knows passages. He even knows some history that they don't know. Literally, even when they're going through Ithilien, he's telling them about, you know, the Morgul Vale in certain parts. You know, even the Easterlings coming in. He's like, oh, wicked men, da da da. Sauron, he literally is the reason, you know, Sauron is actually a physical figure and not just a guy. He's seen Sauron and has talked to him. So in the Dead Marshes, he is deathly afraid, and he hates the sunlight and he hates the moonlight. And it's so telling when he shakes his fist at the sunlight. That's one of my favorite descriptions in the book. He's terrified.
Yeah.
And that tells so much without telling so much in the story. Going through the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because in the movies they make it seem like, okay, so Gollum makes his promise to Frodo that, you know, he's going to take them to Mordor and he will serve the Master of the Precious, right? But it isn't until they give him that whole like back and forth debate scene, like, I hate you, and, telling the Gollum part of himself to go away, essentially. And then he acts pretty good. And then it isn't until like the whole Faramir thing and all of that he starts to change back into his Gollumishness. But in the book, it's so Gollum makes that promise, and Sam kind of notes that he instantly is acting like he's constantly seeking Frodo's approval, like acting like a puppy around him sometimes. But then the moment after he, starts to be afraid, like after the Nazgul he sees the Nazgul flying and he's like, wraiths on wings. Sam notes another change in Gollum, that he was more fawning and would be friendly, but he started giving strange looks in his eye. He had strange looks in his eyes sometimes, especially towards Frodo, and we went back more and more into his old manner of speaking. So it's at much earlier on that we start to see Gollum like breaking a little bit. And that's because of that fear that he has about the things in Mordor and the Nazgul, and being afraid of being caught and going back there.
Yeah. It drives the story, and it shows they're not just going somewhere, haphazard, just like, oh, we can just we can just walk here. No, they cannot be seen at all, and he knows this.
Right.
And it's just so it compels me. So it compels me when you listen to it. Certain little things like that. I implore the reader to listen to what they say and what they don't say, what they do and what they don't do. Like, he would fall down and cover his face, and Tolkien describes this, and you should get something from that as the reader. Like, Jesus, he is freaking really terrified. What did he go through? This is why they can't just
and he makes sure to juxtapose that against Frodo thinking like, oh, we should be glad of the sun. It makes him feel better. Like we all do when it's a nice spring day outside, we go get some sun on our face, we feel better, right? But then Gollum is like, no, this is how you get caught.
They're very much like Boromir. Gollum knows things that other people don't know. Boromir didn't know things, and he's like suggesting things, and Gandalf is like, what? No. Him and Aragorn are like, no, because they know. But Boromir didn't have that information. So Frodo and Sam are like, oh, let's do this. Let's eat here. Or he's like, no, we can't. What are you talking about? Boromir's like, why don't we just go this way? They're like, no, we can't go that way. What's wrong with you? And they're kind of hard on Boromir, but Boromir doesn't know. You know what I'm saying? So this is one of the things that makes Boromir one of my favorite characters, because he's not wrong for his suggestions at all. It's just how they convey, the answers to him of why. They kind of are, Gandalf and Aragorn are kind of arrogant, and they don't do it the right way. They don't explain it to him the right way, to be honest.
I think we talked about that a little bit with Iris, as far as like, Boromir needed like a bro talk, like a one-on-one, like, no, like, this is how it all works. Like, I understand why you are thinking what you're thinking, but here's why it won't work, because it was very much just kind of like he accepted the word of Elrond, but not really. Like, he didn't have a moment.
Sassy Gandalf, and it's like he was getting sassy Gandalf. He shouldn't have got sassy Gandalf. He should have gotten understanding, compassionate. Listen, I know why you're scared. We know what your people are doing, but this is why this won't work, and this is why we definitely can't use this. They go back and read. They kind of yell at him like, "No, Boromir, blah 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 blah." This and it's kind of like, yo, dude, he's not wrong for his thought process, even for thinking, what are you doing with these hobbits? Why are you thinking this is a good idea? That's not a wrong thought process,
right?
You know what I mean? You guys are on a different level of understanding and faith in a different sense. You know what I mean? And even power to even think that this plan would work. It's like kind of
it's funny. Thinking. It's funny to think about that when we're also talking about Frodo and Sam, because Frodo does the opposite with Sam. Like, whenever Sam has a fear and he expresses it, Frodo tries to explain himself completely. Like, even when he isn't like totally on board with what Sam is saying, like when he's trying to explain that no, his rope wouldn't have come undone. Like in the movie they make it a joke, like, elvish rope, like that's not really totally fair to Sam, but Sam is very much like, no, like he explains it, and then Frodo is more like, oh, well, I guess, but I'm just telling you what, he takes time to like go over that stuff. And especially like when he has that, when Sam is really upset about Gollum joining them and being not on a leash, essentially, Frodo takes time to be like, hey, like, even if he does mean to kill us, like, he hasn't tried, really. Like, he hasn't hurt us yet. And if he does, then we'll take care of it. But he also, but what Gollum means to do doesn't matter. It's, what we are trying to do here, which is it's definitely gets lost in the movies. Like, they take those lines away from Frodo.
It's one of the things that people ask me why the Fellowship is my favorite, is because they take their time in the Fellowship. Two Towers seems in the movie a bit rushed at times. They're trying to make things happen. The Fellowship is very methodical, and even though big things are cut, they take their time with even putting little things in there to where it's like, oh, okay, all right, and it's just more thought out and fleshed out. Whereas the Two Towers and even the Return of the King at times feels very rushed, and it was like, I don't know if they were aware of the timing of what they had to get done film wise, but it seems more rushed. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's true because then they try to like fit things in more. So, for example, when we talk about the parts with Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli, they are that moves way quicker, right? And so you miss like this exchange between Legolas and Gimli about Fangorn, and in the movies pieces of it happen when Gimli's talking about like the air being close inside Fangorn, and Legolas talks about the forest being old. And but in the movie or in the books, Legolas is saying like it is old and full of memory. I could have been happy here if I had come in days of peace. And Gimli responds, I dare say you could. You are a wood elf anyway, though elves of any kind are strange folk. Yet you comfort me. Where you go, I will go. But in the movie, like Gimli is always just like he says something like he calls it tree infested and like acting like he's upset about leaving Merry and Pippin there. And then he also is like, he's just very anti-Fangorn the whole time, but Legolas's words help him feel better about it. And I think that says a lot about like their friendship and where they are together. And I also think it's a good moment for Gimli that he's not just this brash, like goofy character, they do have an understanding and they respect each other. And they're not just like, I don't know, just like Gimli in the movies. Like I love John Rhys Davies. I think that he was amazing, but I don't think he had the full context of everything,
They really kind of made him a joke character, which he was when Gandalf falls in Moria and he sees the stone outside next to the mirror. It's a very important and solemn moment. And he's just paying his respects. Even when he was in the tomb, Balin's tomb in the Chamber of Marsbal, he just knelt and covered his face. And, it was very solemn. And he got up and said, his song about, Khazad-dûm. And it was very it wasn't nothing funny about it. He revered his ancient home that he had never been to. He knew the mountains, the names. He had the story. This is why in the books Gandalf had him as one of the guides with him in the movie, in the book. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And they completely take that away in the movie. So these changes and things like that are very interesting. They can hurt a character as far as what people need to see from the character. I'd say what was in the movie, the closest thing to the actual Gimli is when he's actually talking to Galadriel, and he's like, Gandalf fell, and he sighs and he puts his eyes to they put that in the movie. He very much felt very heavy on him because he wanted to go through Moria, and he's like, oh, such a bad decision, but was it on him? Anything could he have done differently? He knows in the book Celeborn is very upset with him. Galadriel comforts him with his own language and words.
Yes, and that is something I actually want to go back to because, okay, so in kind of contrast to what we've been saying, like I feel like when Gandalf joins them, it is reduced, but I think it still captures a lot of the same flavor as in the book. But with a lot of his lines are kept the same, even though there's fewer of them. But one thing that I thought was really interesting, especially like we had this big long conversation about how Galadriel being like, no, Celeborn, like don't talk to Gimli like that, and like then saying really nice things to him about and using like the Dwarvish language a little bit and like naming the places in Khazad-dûm and stuff, and that spoke a lot to Gimli. Well, in this chapter in the White Rider, we find out that Galadriel had sent Gwai here, our giant eagle friend, if anyone recalls from Orthanc. We've seen him before helping Gandalf out. He is how Gandalf escapes from the mountaintop after defeating the Balrog. And it's because Galadriel sent him to look for Gandalf, and I completely forgot that. Like, probably.
She gives him the new staff. She
Mhm.
clothes him in white and gives him the new staff.
Yeah, and it's like that's definitely not addressed, and I understand why, but I think that
Such a nice touch.
right, it's so interesting, and also it based on their Gandalf says, "Thus it was that I came to Caras Galathon and found you but lately gone." So once Galadriel hears that from the Fellowship that Gandalf had died, she obviously doesn't believe that, because she sends Gwaihir around the same time to go get him. And so I think it puts a different and interesting lens on her correcting Celeborn and being like, no, you cannot blame him for Gandalf's death, because she doesn't believe that Gandalf is dead. She's like thinking other thoughts that she doesn't obviously reveal to anybody except for maybe Gwaihir, maybe Celeborn.
Yeah, they don't do. I mean, they do a good job, but they could do a better job of that weight of Gandalf's death when the elves hear it is crazy in the books. They are like, what? And Celeborn is angry.
Yeah.
Like this, because it shows the importance of Gandalf. Little things that Tolkien is a master. It shows the importance of Gandalf when you may not even realize little things Aragorn says throughout the journey. You know what I'm saying? And that Celeborn's anger, Galadriel's response, the elves' response in Lothlorien when they hear of his fall, the lament for them, which they do but it is a sad moment. They are in disbelief. They are in shock. They are extremely hurt and saddened. And Aragorn tells, there's stories even in Rivendell of greatest things that he's done, like that you don't even know about. Like it shows his power and importance. So they could convey it better to me in the movie. They could have done a better job conveying certain things. Like I said, the same thing with Gollum and his fear.
I almost think that they take a lot of lines away from Legolas. Like, I didn't get to bring this up last time, but there's a lot of times where he expresses concern about Merry and Pippin to Aragorn. Like, he's like, I want to keep going. Like, them at the hands of the orcs, like, it tears me up, paraphrasing, obviously. But, they make him so stoic. And even when, like, certain things happen, he just makes a face like, his eyes get real big or whatever, but he doesn't actually get to articulate what he's feeling. But Legolas does talk more in the books, and I think that's a little sad that they didn't take those lines, like put them somewhere so that Legolas can like have some emotional reaction to things. It's almost like they give Gimli too much in the movies and take it all away from Legolas. It's interesting. It's gonna get really weird when we're at the part with Helm's Deep, because that's like a quick chapter, and I think it's gonna be multiple like movie chapters, if you will. Whereas like the passage of the Marshes pretty much lines up exactly with the movie chapter. I mean, some things are moved around, obviously, like we've talked about, like with the Gollum thinking about Shelob already. That doesn't happen later into the movies, but as far as it ending with ring wraiths flying around, that's pretty much accurate. When Legolas and Aragorn and Gimli ride off with Gandalf to Edoras, that's pretty much the end of that act of the chapter of the White Rider. So it's going to be interesting, but I think that pretty much covered all the things that I had outlined in these chapters. Is there anything else, KnewBetta, that I am missing that you really think is important to note? Change-wise, things you thought went well, anything like that?
No, they literally fall right outside on both ends, the things I would say. So the part we're covering, we missed. So I thought it was really important. Aragorn's presence when he's talking to Éomer in the circle. Extremely important. Also, Aragorn's presence when they get to Edoras and they get to Menethil, and they try to take his sword. He already has Andrew, and he is not having it. and he shows his kingliness and his want to go to Minas Tirith, or go help his people, and his
Yeah, well, that is something that we
it's
didn't really
very
get to
different.
talk about last time when Aragorn meets Éomer, and he like at first he introduces himself as Strider, right?
Yeah, he's
Until
being very
he
custom like. He's like,
until
oh, okay,
and he's like trying to see where Éomer's like loyalties lie, But in the movie, he's just like, "Hi, I'm Aragorn," and this is like, "Listen, this is Gimli,"
yeah,
But
it doesn't. It shows no importance whatsoever. When literally in the book, he's explaining himself. He knows that Éomer is the third marshal of the Mark, so he's just paying that respect. But once it starts dragging, he's like, all right, listen, I'm Aragorn. This is what we're doing. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing? You want to fight, or what we doing? Because I'm going here, and this is what it is. Whose allegiance is you under? Because we're no friends of Mordor. And he steps up and he shows his like, listen, this is what it is, and this is what it's gonna be, or we just gonna have to fight. Now choose. And Éomer is taken aback, like, oh wow, I didn't even, and the same thing at the door where he's like, I'm not giving this sword was made by Telkor, and absolutely no. And he's not, you know what I mean? It shows man, it's just a pride. It shows that Aragorn is not Strider at times. Sometimes he shows that he's Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and that needs to be put in. They have him so reluctant at times in the movie throughout the whole thing. It's like, he wasn't that way all the time. When he needed to put his foot down, when he needed to show his kingliness, it says that even the people watching him were like, wow, he looked like a king of old. And
and Legolas it only appears to Legolas, but it appears to him as if he has like a crown on when he's doing that.
Very important things that they kind of miss out on. Even just the subtle, just him raising his voice or being like, he only does it when they're like, what say you? But that's already at the Return of the King, and he doesn't even do that in the book. So it's like,
it's so interesting, like the way the character choices that Peter and team decided to make, right? Because whereas the hobbits, I think, have shown a lot of grit and bravery before at this point and before, they don't really get to do that until Return of the King, right? But then with Aragorn, they do this really, really slow build, right, of him deciding to take the throne, but it was more a matter of like diplomacy and like timing for him than anything. He wanted them to want him, I guess, if you want to put it like that.
And do it the right way, but he definitely wanted it.
Yeah, for sure. And
he wanted to claim his destiny and do the right thing.
And so it's interesting, but then they take away, I feel like, some of the progress that like Gimli and Legolas make through their friendship in the movie. Like it's like there, but they don't really dwell on it very much. But I think that the way Tolkien has divided up Two Towers and part of Return of the King, like he is trying to spend a decent amount of time with everybody, not just where like at this point in the movie we're kind of flipping through everybody's story relatively quickly.
I hate that they didn't put Erkenbrand in there. That is a whole nother thing that I'm upset about.
Are you going to come on our Helm's Deep episode and talk about Erkenbrand?
Please, because I have a whole feeling about that they didn't put Erkenbrand, that they couldn't put him in. It didn't make sense. And I feel like I could dispel that. I feel like it would have made more sense to put Erkenbrand in there. We would have been able to focus on Éomer's importance and him and Aragorn. Aragorn would bring out the importance of Éomer by him saying, hey, this is the hour we draw swords together. He says that to Éomer, not the Theoden. And it, you know what I mean? And Theoden can maintain and be himself and everything would have been, and then it made more sense for Gandalf to go get Erkenbrand because they're talking about the Westfold. They're showing you the burning of the Westfold. They have the children leave the Westfold. Who is the leader of the Westfold? Erkenbrand. So why wouldn't we go get him? You don't have to necessarily see him or whatever. It explains Helm Hammerhand. He says Erkenbrand is like Helm Hammerhand come again. So why have all that stuff about him when you don't know who he is, but you know he's great clearly? You
Right.
know what I'm saying? And then, oh, it's Erkenbrand, da da, from the West Pole. The West Pole was destroyed, it was burned, da da. Yeah, he has all the people. They didn't get killed. He came back. Eomer's here, Aragorn's here, the king's here. Now we fully everything's realized. Why not do that? Instead of having
Yeah.
freaking wargs, this big warg fight that
I know. Don't even talk to me
Aragorn
at the wargs
pulls
yet.
off into the river. And what was that all about?
It's so painful. It's so Anna, is there anything about this part of the movie that you really liked or thought they did well, or maybe you had additional questions on that we could go over?
Not this particular part. I think the most interesting parts become a little bit before, a little bit after.
Was there anything we didn't get to touch on from before?
Check my notes real quick. When I rewatched the movie, I like Carl Urban in this. I forget that he's in it every single time. And I'm like, oh, look at baby.
That's so funny because when I see Carl Urban, I'm like, Eomer. Like whenever he's in anything.
Like Bones from Star Trek. But so this is another thing that's more about the Dead Marshes. So I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about now.
Yeah, it is.
They reference a battle that occurred there, and that's why the marsh is a marsh.
Oh yeah.
What is that?
KnewBetta, I'm gonna let you take that.
It's the Battle of Daggerland. So literally, the Battle of the Last Alliance. So when the Last Alliance finally came together, they left Rivendell and they went. There's a giant plain before the gates of Mordor called Daggerland, and that is literally where they had a giant fight first. The problem was that King Thranduil, Legolas's father. At this time in the Second Age, when Sauron was in power, Thranduil wasn't the king. His father, Orfer, was a king. And Orfer is the king of the Elves of Mirkwood, Sylvan Elves. And he hated the Noldor Elves. So he agreed to fight with the Noldor Elves, who Gil-galad is the king of the Noldor Elves. And then we had the Elves from Lothlorien. He agreed. So his contingent was with the Elves of Lothlorien and their king. And he agreed to fight with them, but he didn't like the Noldor Elves. Like many elves of the Sindar and Sylvan races didn't like them because they felt they were usurpers and they came and they took everything and they caused a lot of problems. So he was of that like mind. So he literally was supposed to wait before going in to this battle. And he didn't, because he was like, I'm not listening to them. I'm going to do what I want to do. And he goes in and it was a train wreck and they get slaughtered. And this is why Thranduil is actually the king. Orfer gets killed. And all his peoples and the king of Lothlorien, if I'm not mistaken, I could have that. Let me just double check in my mind, but those elves get killed, and it was a disastrous battle. Many orcs, men, and elves were killed, and this is the first beginnings of the Dead Marshes. It was a giant plain at first, but the marshes were creeping up, and then there are two other battles where near the same place where men, elves, orcs slain, dead in the graves there. But the graves were creeped up upon by the marshes, where it just kept getting a bit larger and larger. And now it's a big marsh there. It's no longer a plain. It's full of it just inhabited the graves of these dead beings, and it just became cursed. And of course, you have Sauron doing what he does and his sorcery and the Witch King and all of them. So I'm assuming, this is just my interpretation, he probably was like, you know what? This used to be a plain. It's hard. It's a bulwark to get through this. Let me kind of send out whatever vibes and inhabit these marshlands and bring these spirits to life. Very similar to the Burrow Downs, how the Witch King sent fell spirits to inhabit the bones of the dead men of the Dunedain. So I'm thinking Sauron or the Witch King, maybe one of the nine, has something to do with that. This is my thought process, though. Don't quote me, but
it feels right, haunted, though.
And it's like, just like he left Shelob to guard Cirith Ungol in that pass. He's like, I have the tower there, but this cave, I don't need anybody. I have a good guard there. He doesn't think people will go through the marshes, and he's like, they're haunted anyway. So
True.
He doesn't
And
really
it
have
mentions that
anybody.
like Frodo and Sam and Gollum are so tiny and light that they are able to find paths through the marshes, like on
Yeah.
the ground that is semi-stable. But I don't
Yeah.
think like if
An army can't go that way.
mm-mm,
So
no.
yeah. That's where the dead marshes come from.
Nasty.
Good to know. Nice details. I like that.
But that also reminds me of something else that happens in this chapter that I wrote down, but then I forgot to bring it up earlier with Frodo and Sam and Gollum. I feel like a key difference between this part in the movie and the book is that like Peter's version is trying to draw more and more comparisons between Frodo and Gollum and starting to pull Frodo and Sam apart.
Oh, yeah.
I guess
that very early.
Yeah, and it hurts my heart a lot, but but you know, there's like the thing where Frodo falls into the dead marshes and like there's the creepy guys like all green and like and then Gollum is the one that grabs him out and saves him.
That's not
and
what happened.
No, not at all. And Frodo has like slime on his hands at one point when he falls back. He probably tripped or something. We don't see it happen, but we're at the point of view of Sam, and Sam is the one that goes back for him and makes sure that he's with the group, because Frodo is having more and more trouble bearing the burden of the ring and is slower, and Gollum is trying to like keep him going, keep him going faster. And then you see this whole scene in the movie where Frodo reminds Gollum that his name is Smeagol or whatever, and Smeagol always refers to himself as Smeagol. If he's talking about himself to somebody, he always uses his name. No one needed to remind him what his name was. And like at that, and also
other people call him Gollum. He knows himself as Smeagol.
Yeah, he doesn't
this
call
is
himself.
One of the reasons his psyche split is because they called him Gollum because of the noise he made in his throat. So he wouldn't call himself that. Same thing, Sauron does not allow the orcs or anybody to write the name Sauron or use the name Sauron because that's not his name. That was given to him as a mockery by the elves. So it's not like Sauron's calling himself Sauron. He doesn't like the name. It's a mockery. The same thing with Morgoth. Morgoth is not that man's name. His name is Melkor. It means he who arises in might. It's a very admirable name. He's the strongest. But the Feanor named him Morgoth, the black enemy. Sauron's name is Myron, the admirable. It's literally Sauron means the abhorred. So you don't want somebody calling you that. No. Gollum is like a mockery. It's like, look what his name, Gollum, that calling you that.
Like the sound
Smeagol
that he makes.
Is his regular name. He knows himself as Smeagol. So there's a mirror there for all those characters, and it's actually brought up like that Sauron doesn't allow when they thinking that the S on Saruman's orcs is for Sauron. Gimli's like, yo, that's clearly for Saruman. No, he doesn't allow his name to be spoken or said that way. You know what I'm saying? And only the reason they call the mouth of Sauron, a lot of people are like, well, why do they call the mouth of Sauron the mouth of Sauron? Because
that's everyone his job.
Knows Sauron as Sauron. So that is okay because it's his title, and literally he's known by everyone. He's going to say the mouth of Sauron. Not everybody knows Sauron's real name. So that title is going to be allowed there in that sense. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's super interesting. The parallels between like, what we call ourselves and the names that are bestowed upon us. Right. Yeah. So we're starting to see at this point, like Frodo and Sam in the movies are kind of have this wedge that is Gollum or Smeagol in between them, but that's not really how it is in the book. Like Frodo and Sam are still very much close, and like they are each other's thing, but the difference is that Frodo in the books is giving Gollum a level of trust, right? He's like, you're not going to hurt us. I don't believe that. I don't believe you're going to run away or betray us at this point. At least the ring will hold you to that so far.
He holds very much accountable by the ring.
So
but he's like not worried because the ring he's not going to betray the ring.
But it allows Frodo to show Gollum some kindness, right? Because he trusts in that promise. Whereas Sam is always suspicious of Gollum, but him and they're still close and they will remain close. There's never like a point where Frodo discards Sam for Gollum.
Yeah, that's bull. That pissed me off in the movie.
I know. I know when Edith was talking about coming on again, because I know that they want to talk about Frodo and Sam more. They were like, I can't do the Shelob part because they don't want to talk about that moment in the movie. And I was like, I don't blame you. That's gonna be not fun. Because there are like, I think some of the more painful changes are happening with Frodo and Sam at this point. Whereas like, losing some of Gimli and Legolas's relationship, I do think it's sad, and but it does bother me. But I think that there are points where
like
like,
deal.
Yeah, like you can move on from it. But the relationship between Frodo and Sam, I think, is so pivotal to everything that it's gonna get harder as we go on. But there's keeping Gandalf more or less intact, so that's something, I guess.
Gandalf is the truest character in the entire. He stays very similar to Gandalf in the books.
They try.
The character, period, in the entire movie. Gandalf is Gandalf.
Yeah,
very much so, Gandalf.
And it's interesting to make that choice, right? As a director or a screenwriter, being like, okay, we're gonna keep Gandalf the way that fans know him, or at least the way that he has been presented to us, more or less, but we're gonna make all these other little tweaks. So it's like, I would be interested to hear like the thought process on some of that. Like, I know that in the appendices they explain like the Faramir thing because they're trying to show how hard it is to resist the ring, and I'm like, whatever. But I know. But then with like Legolas and Gimli, I'm like, some of these lines would take 5 seconds for them to say.
Exactly. So it was an artistic choice, and it is what it is. But it's fun to analyze and go over. I think it's important because a lot of people don't know these things. They've only seen the movie. So I'm not sure if we can pause right here because I gotta get back to my son. But
yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna do a quick wrap up of what we talked about. So this, so far we've seen them pass through the dead marshes with Frodo and Sam and Gollum. We're going to get to the Black Gate next time, and then we're going to see Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli with Gandalf reach Edoras, and we're going to meet Theoden. We're going to talk some more about the Rohirrim, and I'm sure that we'll dig into more parts of the Treebeard chapter that didn't get to see in this part of the movie, but happened already in the part of the book. So that'll be fun. Be sure to join us next time, and be sure to follow KnewBettaDoBetta. Be sure to follow his podcast, Voices of Arda, and of course our good friend Callie Cosplay as well. That will all be linked. And you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. So we will see you around, and then we will see you next week.
All right. See ya.